Okay, you guys, I'm so excited. Welcome to the season 2 of Manifesting Basics. So, in this episode, we are going to dive deep into building courage and being fully expressed in your greatness. I'm really excited because we have Jean here with us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Jean Walton. I am the founder, CEO of Everyday Girl Adventures, events, studio, social club. Also the founder and lead organizer for Misfit Networking. I showcase women-owned businesses and organize women empowerment events.
Mm-hmm.
And also an author and a publisher of Misfit Press.
Yep. And I really wanted to have you on the show because I'm going to be real with you. When I first met you, I was a little triggered.
Really? Why?
I was. I didn't know what it was at the time. But I'm the type of person, I'm like, what? Because it's not about you, really. It's always something within me, and this is how I feel. So I was like, okay, Amber. I had this conversation with myself. I said, okay, Amber, why do you feel something? And I was like, amongst a lot of people I've been around, they always look at me as the one that's always like, how do you do that? And, that was always my thing. And when I met you, like your energy was so big, so expressive. And I was looking at you, I'm like, gosh, she's so fully expressed. Wow. And so courageous. And I was like, maybe you're feeling like you're not doing as much, like you're not fully expressed. Because if I really take a deep dive into like myself, I'm like, am I dipping my toe in the thing, or am I truly going there? Mm-hmm. Am I truly overcoming my fear? Am I truly expressing myself in such a beautiful way, which we all have, right? So that's what that was. And I was like, and this conversation, honestly, for me, is so healing.
Well, good. I hope so. Well, what's interesting to me about you saying that is Charlene from Apricot Lane Boutique was the one who introduced us.
Yeah.
And she told me, when she dragged me over to meet you, she was like, you need to meet this woman. She is just like you. And I was like, really? So I was surprised. And she introduced us, and she's like, she reminds me of you so much. And it was the positive messages, manifestation. Funny about that is I didn't used to believe it.
Oh, really?
No.
You didn't believe in manifestation?
No, because I grew up Christian.
Okay.
I grew up really strict Catholic growing up. And there's just something with Christianity where you need to, like, even though we're derived by faith, you tend to be skeptical about anything that doesn't seem like it's faith-based, even though it is. But at the time, I didn't know that.
Right.
Spiritualism and Christianity at the time didn't go hand in hand with me.
Totally.
Now they do. Okay. Now that I started seeing things happening and signs coming my way and me ignoring them, then I started paying attention to things, and then I started wishing for things, and people always thought I was really lucky. And I'm like, I don't think I'm just lucky. I just think I jump on opportunities.
And do you believe that it's going to happen for you?
Yes. And that's when I started learning is that positivity breeds positivity. Mm-hmm. And so that's the big thing for me is I started just inviting only positive things into my life, and that's all I got. Mm-hmm. And that's the funny thing is, like, I believe that the power of attraction, the laws of attraction, positivity breeds positivity. If you're looking for positive things, you're going to find them. Mm-hmm. If you are looking for negative things, you're going to find them. Mm-hmm. And so then I started really just paying attention to those things, and I'm like, wow, our minds are really powerful.
Yes.
If we allow them to be.
Yeah.
And so I started allowing them to be, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to start saying yes to every opportunity that comes my way. And that's how I started doing all of this stuff.
And I think that is what I love about you, is that courage, because, you know, I think for a lot of people, and I wanted to talk about, like, if you have fear of being seen, like when it comes to your business or your brand or anything, but even if you don't have any of those things, I remember just being so, like, fearful of just kind of leaving the house and like going to a restaurant by myself or even to the store conjured up a lot of fear. And so that can be a lot of people's, like, narrative and every day of just being fearful of all the things that could go wrong. And even just today, I was thinking about this interview. I'm like, all the things that, and I'm like, oh, no. We're not doing that.
Well, you know what's funny about you saying that is, like, I almost got in an accident on the way here.
Oh, no.
It felt like everything was against me leaving my house.
Really?
Isn't that funny how things like that? And I'm like, what is it trying to tell me?
Yeah. And Mary's not trying to tell you anything.
Sometimes it is, though, and you just don't know until later. And that's something
Really?
I've discovered, is that you're right. Sometimes we never know. But when things are that difficult, usually later on, maybe not even today, maybe it doesn't even pertain to today. Later on, sometimes something happens that's similar, and then I'm like, that's why, that's what was happening. That's what it was trying to tell me.
Okay.
So that I'm like, well, what is this? Why is everything so difficult for me today? And that's why when I got here, I was a little flustered.
Oh, no. Yeah,
because I was like,
flustered.
I'm like, I set aside just enough time to get myself ready and get out the door, and I did. And then all these things, like traffic in the way, and this person turned when they had a red light when I was going through a green light, and I slammed on my brakes, and so it was just like, and all my stuff when my car went flying, and I was just like, thankfully I did not get in an accident. I don't know, I feel like those things, they do teach you something. Eventually, maybe not even in the moment, but there's something for some reason, or it was keeping me from getting into worse trouble or in a serious accident or something. Those things happen sometimes. And I've seen those things happen. I remember one day I was leaving work and I was behind this slowpoke and I just wanted to go home. And I'm like, what the heck? Why did they cut me off? Why are they in front of me? And then going through the light, another car was coming through this stop sign. And
oh, wow.
If I hadn't been behind that slow car, they would have hit me.
Wow.
And I was like watching it as it happened, as the car was going through the stoplight, and I was going through the green light, and I didn't hit them. And I was like, if that car had not gotten in front of me, that car would have hit me. So I've seen things like that, and I do believe the power of positivity, but also things you can't explain.
Yeah. And maybe sometimes it's just telling you to slow down.
Well, that's true too.
Like sometimes, like, I feel when I'm not being present or mindful and things are like spilling or I'm dropping the spoon or whatever it is, like I feel like, okay, that's just a signal of me to be more present, be in the now, because all that exists is the now, is to be more present. And come back. Because sometimes we go forward into the future or we're in the past and we're not here. And so sometimes I feel like that those are just reminders sometimes when we are flustered and, you know, it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to slow down a bit, you know. But
it's true.
Everyday girl adventures. Is it everyday adventures or everyday girl adventures?
The funny thing about that was the reason why I decided to start my business was because I was having everyday adventures. I was saying yes to every opportunity. People would ask me, they're like, you must be rich. And I'm like, no, why? They're like, well, you travel all the time. You do fun stuff all the time. And I'm like, no, I have serious FOMO and I say yes to every opportunity. So if something seems worth my time or it's going to be fun, I'm going to say yes. And I'm a problem solver. So I'll say yes, and then I'll figure it out. Sometimes I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. And then I'm like, but I'm going to do it and I'm going to figure it out. And so that's why I was inspired. One of my sisters works with astronauts. And so I get to do some really cool space events with her. And it's been one of my inspirations because she manages women astronauts.
Oh, wow.
And so I've gotten to work on a team with them a couple of times and see what women can do. Doesn't matter who we are, all walks of life, going towards the same purpose. And that really inspired me. But I got to go to London and be in Europe for 2 weeks. I say almost entirely free. The second week was free. I worked my butt off the first week for the Space Gala in London. However, watching all the pieces come together and all the women come together, and we were an all-woman production team, and that really it really impacted me. But
in what way?
Just watching what we could do if we just get out of our heads and we are working together and we're going to make this really amazing thing happen. And that wasn't the first time I experienced that with her, but it was like a mind-blowing, just because of how big it was. It was a 350 person gala. She brought 11 astronauts over, and me watching this and also being part of it and being behind the scenes and helping it happen was really an amazing thing for me to do. But then I went to Portugal because other people said no. And I was like, I'm going on holiday because I got invited to. And I realized I wanted to show other people how to do that. And so I decided I was going to start a business called Everyday Adventures. And I came back and actually I wrote all about this story in my first book, which I have right here, Everyday Girl Adventures. So I wrote a chapter about that, about how I started all of this and became the misfit entrepreneur because I decided my sister does really cool things and she knows really important people and people with a lot of money. And I met all these women self-starters, but I realized I wanted to do these things for everyday people and show them how. And so I'm like, I'm going to start a business called Everyday Adventures. So I came back here to Colorado after 2 weeks in Europe. And I was like, I'm going to start a business. And so I threw myself a birthday party because it was my birthday coming up. And that's where it all began. And but when I started networking after that, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how I was going to do it, why I was going to make any of these things happen. I just knew I was supposed to, and I felt pulled and guided to it. So nobody understood what I was trying to do. When I said I wanted to do community events that were unique and memorable and affordable, and partner with small businesses, nobody got it. Nobody understood it. And I got the little pat on the back so something, whenever I get my heart broken like that, I sit there and I cry a little bit. And then I go, but why am I doing this? So I'm really, really good at asking myself why. Those questions that you're supposed to. And why am I doing this? And I realized I was doing it because of the girl time. My relationships with my mother, my daughter, my sisters. I have 4 sisters. And my girlfriends.
Brothers?
I have 5 brothers as well.
Oh, wait.
A large family. I come from, which is part of the reason why I have such a passion for community.
Oh, I see.
Because I'm so used to being around chaos and a lot of people.
Okay.
So then Everyday Adventures became Everyday Girl Adventures.
And I love that because I think, like you said, it's for the everyday girl. And I think that we put a lot of emphasis on like, push through the fear, have courage if you got a business and a brand.
But we don't always.
I think it's really important for us as everyday people to really have the courage and push through that fear that we all experience. I mean, it's not even just like if you have something huge. We all experience fear in some capacity in our lives. And I think that, I wrote a children's book called The Fearless Muscle. And so it is exercising that muscle. And as you exercise that fearless muscle, it gets easier and easier. And then you get more courageous and then you just do bigger things. And it's like, nothing really affects you. Because I remember like the first time I did an event, you know, I called all these people and everybody told me no. But I kept going.
It happens.
Yeah, kept going. And then eventually you get a yes. And that's all you need is one yes, right?
Well, so when you hear people's stories, like famous people or people that have done a lot of things, that's usually part of their story.
Yeah.
They got a whole bunch of no's before they got their yes, and they got their big break. And so that's one of the things that drives me, but really it's the people.
Yeah.
Because I know there's a lot of people depending on me to make these things happen now.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't want to disappoint them. So
if you could give, so you haven't always been this way.
Oh God, no.
So if you could give other people advice on how to push through fear and be courageous, what would be like the top 2 pieces of advice would you give them?
I would tell them to think about whether or not this is kind of like look into the future, sort of like think about where you want to be. And if you can envision it, and most of the time, and like I can see it, and that's what drives me.
And I have a vision board.
I do have a couple.
Oh, okay.
I do, but I don't look at them all the time. Actually, what I have is a note in my phone.
Oh, okay.
And it works as the same purpose. And I look at that often. And I have these goals and I have these things and checklists. I do a lot of checklists.
Yeah.
But really, I just tell people, like, is this where you want to be? Where you're at right now? And that is what drives me forward, is I can see that I've done some things, but I'm not where I want to be yet.
I would say, you know, I think that sometimes people would say that if you ask them that question, is this where I want to be? They'll say yes.
Sometimes.
But I don't believe that that's true.
Have you read The Alchemist?
Yes.
That was life-changing for me. And so I agree with you because, and I just had this conversation with somebody last night at a networking event. Somebody gave me The Alchemist because of my positive mindset. And they're like, this reminds me of you. You need to have this. So I read it. And before I even read it, I read the synopsis on the back and I was like, I need to read this. This is going to be life-changing for me. And that was before I did any of this stuff. So that was another reason I did this, was I realized I was the alchemist. So when you read that book, you're either the alchemist or you're the baker or the crystal shop owner. And they all have a purpose and a comfortableness at where they are. And the alchemist, he wasn't comfortable with his life. He wanted more and he had big dreams and he was going to make them happen no matter all the failures. And so that's what I remind myself of when I go through the trials and tribulations that come, the ups and downs, the roller coaster of going after your dreams. And it's not easy.
Yeah.
But there are times where it's really worth it. And I'm sure that you go through these things too, where you have a win or a success. And then you're like, wow, like this is why I do it. This is why I put myself through this stuff.
And like thinking about like the everyday girl. And I think that, you know, some people will say, and what I was saying before is like, people will say no to that question. But I also think because they don't have this like big, grandiose goal or a business or a brand
but you don't have to.
Right. Because there's always another level in which you can be. You can go to another level of being a better friend.
Right.
Or a better mother. Or a better spouse.
Or even just have a better day. Like keeping it at like you have a bad morning, you can always turn that around.
Right. Right. And it's just like you said, going to another level within yourself and showing up as a better person the next day. You know, they say like being a better version of myself than I was yesterday, and like those kind of things. And I think that sometimes people Like that kind of stuff is not for me. I don't need to like do these things and have adventures and stuff like that. But it really is helpful in you being a better version of yourself. And it's not for anyone else but yourself.
Well, it's true. And one of the things I always tell people is nobody ever wishes they worked more at the end of their days.
That's true.
But they do wish that they would have spent more time with their loved ones and did all the things they always wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's
more of that.
Yes. And that, and have a legacy, make an impact. That's pretty typical of most people.
Yeah.
Because at the end of your days, you're not thinking, man, I wish I would have
gave myself away some more, like,
or had more miserable days or whatever.
Yeah.
But usually it's the regrets. And so that's what I'm trying to teach is you can always turn your day around. Start small even.
Yeah.
Like that's why everyday adventures, it's your coffee in the morning. It's anything that you just enjoy doing that makes a happy memory.
Yeah. And that's what I like about you. It's like you're so fun and you have such, like you said, such a positive like outlook on life. Like every day is an adventure. Like, you know, it's funny. Like now that I think about it, I remember when my kids were young and I was going on like a trip for the first time by myself with my kids. And I was telling one of my coworkers, I was like, oh my gosh, like all these things are going to happen. I was so fearful. And she's like, you know what? You're looking at this thing, all right. You're looking at it as like this fearful kind of thing, situation, circumstance, when you need to reframe that as an adventure. And when she told me that kind of, I was like, that minute perspective shift changes everything, because that nervousness that you feels the same. It feels the same as fear, but if you change it,
it can be anticipation.
Reframe it. It can be anticipation for an adventure.
And actually, one of the things, and I've always been really good at this, is finding the silver lining.
Yeah,
because that's part of it too. So adventures aren't always fun.
That's true.
Adventures are stories, right?
Oh,
so that's where I started being like, what? This sucks, but it's going to be a good story.
Yeah.
And so when I started thinking that way, and then I always say, I'm either laughing or crying, and I'd rather be laughing.
Yeah. Which leads me to your book, right? Isn't it stories?
It is relatable stories by everyday people from all walks of life. And actually, this book has an astronaut.
Okay.
That wrote, and she told her inspirational story of the things that she had to go through before she became an astronaut in the military. So it's very inspiring. The first book, I just asked people to write a story that had a fun element that would make people smile. And then it got some attention. And so the second book, men wanted to write in it, which was always my intention. It was never just meant for girls.
That's why it's everyday adventures.
Everyday adventures. So we circled back to my original idea of everyday adventures for everyday people. But women, we show up for each other, we cheer each other on, we're inspired by each other's journeys. And that's the reason why Everyday Girl Adventures had to happen first. And the social club and the community that I've built is for women because we're the underdog, a lot of the time. And so it's important for us to come together and become sisters and be there for each other.
Yeah.
And that's why I created that. That's why I created Misfit Networking. But this book, it has 19 authors in it, including a dog.
A dog?
Actually pretty proud of myself for that one because one of my authors he actually submitted 4 stories.
Oh, wow.
And it was really hard to decide which one to use, but one really stuck out with me. And then another one stuck out with my partner, my business partner, Jamie, who does the majority of the editing. We do it together, but she has more of a background for it. So she's the expert, but we do it together. But she liked one of the stories and I really liked the dog story. And it was written from a dog's perspective. And I was like, well, dogs have adventure too.
Yeah.
And that's when I had this vision of everyday adventures, I was thinking everyday adventures for everyday people, everyday girl, everyday guy, everyday kid, everyday pet. So I always had that in my mind. So I was like, well, it'd be perfect. And then I looked into it and I'm like, can a dog be an author? Turns out they can.
Oh, wow. You know what that reminds me of? Chicken Soup for the Soul.
That's what everybody tells me. And you know what's funny? I've never read that and I don't know why, because I'm a reader. I don't know why I've never read it, but everybody tells me that this series reminds them of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And then they say, you can never read it now because it will change you to, you won't look at what you're doing the same. So I'm like, dang it, now I'm curious.
Yeah, that's fun. That's so fun. And I love that. I love that you have this energy of just, you can do it, and just courageous and pushing through fear. And I think that for so many of us, that's so important to, and one of my favorite quotes is, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And you really have to have the courage and decide and choose.
You don't even have to have the courage, because I don't even have the courage sometimes. But what I do have is the drive.
Okay.
And sometimes that's enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes it's the motivation because it's your purpose. It's what you know you want to do. And you want to do it that bad.
Yeah.
That you it's that whole, I guess, do it scared.
Yeah.
I suppose is the same thing. For me, I've always hated fake it till you make it. Always hated that because it seems inauthentic, not genuine. But doing it scared, I mean, they say if you're not scared, your dreams aren't big enough or something like that, I think I heard.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't think that that's necessarily true. I just think that it's if you find a passion, you can use that as your adrenaline. And I do.
Yeah. And I'm huge into energy, and I like everything that you're saying, like, kind of tickles my energy nerd a bit because you're like using the energy, because basically what you're doing is using the energy to move you forward. And like when you were talking about women and us coming together for like a common goal, a common purpose, it's that collective energy that is so powerful. And I love that. So I really wanted to have you on. Thank you so much
Thank you for having
coming
me
on the podcast. And I hope you guys enjoyed this show. Is there anything else you want to kind of leave the audience with?
Say yes to every opportunity. You never know what dreams will come true.
Yeah. A big thing we can learn from this is, I love that Jean is just like fully expressed. And, I think that a lot of times we get in our own heads about expressing ourselves. And like I said in the beginning of this episode, that for me is this, wow, like she is just fully expressed and doing the thing. And like, I'm just tipping my toe, and I want to be that way. And
I don't think that that's true, because I think the same thing about you. When I've watched your podcast, I've watched it.
Oh,
and it's true. Like it's funny when people tell me that I intimidate them, and I'm like, me? No, no, you. So you have this big presence, this big personality that you don't even realize, I guess. Because we all have those moments of inferiority, I think. I feel it quite often. Yeah. But I think that most of us do, and we just don't realize that other people feel it too.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's like our perception of who we are and how things are, it's always so different from what it seems.
Well, what the reality is.
Yeah, well, we have this like...
We make it up in our head.
Yeah, we make it up in our heads. Yeah. And that's our reality. That's our personal reality, which, I talk about on on the YouTube channel is like, you create your realities.
Well, I told you when I got here, you inspired my look today because you always wear these cute hats and you always have this really fun style. And I'm like,
thank you.
I'm going to have to step it up. And I'm like, I want to wear a cute hat.
Thank you so much. But where can they find the book and where can they find you on social media?
So you can get the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books. If you want to be a published author in the next book, please reach out to me, Jean at everydaygirladventures.com.
Oh, that's fun.
Also, socials, Everyday Girl Adventures on both Facebook, Everyday Girl Adventures, or Everyday Girl _Adventures on Instagram, and everydaygirladventures.com. If you go to any of those places, you will see all the fun and adventures, and you can come and be a part of them.
Well, thank you so much for showing up. And this was such a fun conversation. And like I said, it was super healing for me. And I wish you the most success. And hopefully we can keep this thing going.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. We would check you guys. Oh, wait. Like and subscribe. And we would check you guys in the next episode of Manifesting Basics. Bye.